Hello, Susan Munro here, Chair of Elizabeth's Group, and this is lockdown number 6. Now, lockdown number 6 is all about statues. It's all about female statues in particular, and I'm hoping that you're going to enjoy this as much as I've enjoyed making it. Got some really interesting people to talk to you. I've got Terri Bell Helliwell of the Invisible Women's Org. She's going to tell us all about the need for women's statues. I've got the wonderfully talented Hazel Reeves, who was the sculptor for the Emmeline statue in Manchester. I've got Andrew Simcock, who is a councillor with Manchester City Council and led on the Emmeline campaign. And I've also got our own Kay Wesley, who is a town councillor here at Congleton, and I'm hoping she's going to tell us what the statue will mean for Congleton. So over to our first guest, who is Terri Bell Helliwell of Invisible Women Org. Now, Terri hasn't got Zoom facility, but she sent us an audio and some stills. So over to Terri. Thank you.
Hello, this is Terri Bell Helliwell from invisiblewomen.org.uk. Invisible Women exists as a catalyst for gender equality in UK civic statues, so that we can all celebrate the great women of the past in order to inspire great women in the future. It appears that it's a truth universally acknowledged that a civic space in need of a statue will probably get one of a man, because that's what the statistics tell us. In the UK, about 85% of civic statues are of men. The remaining 15% are mostly made up of either the ubiquitous Queen Victoria, and what a good PR team she must have had, or of a sad assembly of allegorical angels and naked nymphs, generally allegedly saintly, but actually sexualised, but definitely not strong or inspiring role models for women or girls. Only about 2.7% of UK statues are of real named women with their clothes on who've been honoured for their achievements. That's 2.7% to represent 50% of the population. This gross inequality just begs the question, why? I first asked myself this when going through central London on a bus, and I saw the monument to women who served in World War II. But it took me some time to understand exactly what it was. I saw a large striking plinth hung with sculpted uniforms, but there were no women in it. It was only on reading the inscription that I realised who it was actually meant to honour. This absence of women was all the more striking because London is overflowing with statues of male servicemen, and they're all wearing their uniforms, riding horses, bearing arms. In short, unlike the absent women, they are fully embodied, fully present, fully represented. This so-called women's monument just reduces the service and sacrifice of those women to the contents of their wardrobes. This stark contrast is repeated all over the country and all over the world. So again, the question is why? We can see that statues have been erected since earliest times, and it's an expensive business. So it's been almost exclusively the regal or political powers of the day who could choose what to put up. And in patriarchal societies, the predominantly male leaders have chosen male institutions and male preoccupations to take centre stage over the centuries, willfully blind to the real contributions of women. This is nicely illustrated in Leeds. Here we see the mighty Black Prince wielding power physically and regally. He's backed by 4 worthy gentlemen, each displaying their professional and intellectual accomplishments, and they're surrounded by a circle of nameless naked nymphs, holding up lights, whose sole purpose is to be decorative and titillating. But does this unequal representation have any effect? Well, given that we've had equal pay legislation for over 40 years, but still have a huge gender pay gap, it does seem that, apart from legislating for equality, there must be other influences at work. And one of these is this prevailing subliminal narrative of male superiority, quietly sold to us in all our city parks and squares and museums. Civic statues invite us to look up to them, both literally and figuratively, They seek to influence us, to tell us the story that men are the ones who achieve political, intellectual, sporting and professional success. Women's achievements are vanishingly rarely celebrated. Since the powers that be have continued to erect statues, we have to conclude that they pay their way, that they do have a real effect, that in fact they may wield considerable influence. You might actually see civic statues as the original subliminal ad campaign for the patriarchy, the first influencers. Statues have a quiet, persistent power. They last a very long time. So in the interests of a fair and balanced society, we should also see the images of the achievements of women, because we know where untrammelled male power leads. For an illustration of that, we have only to look at the male groupthink that so many leading commentators say gave rise to the financial crisis of 2008. Equality of representation for women needs to extend to civic statues, with women's achievements seen alongside those of men. It's in this spirit that Invisible Women calls for the celebration of the great women of the past. And amongst these, Elizabeth Elmy is surely a most worthy candidate. She made a major contribution to equality of representation in the UK. She was described by Emmeline Pankhurst as the brains of the suffragist movement, which was a massive, complex, sophisticated organisation that achieved an unprecedented success, a success that fundamentally benefits the entire nation and all of us to this very day. So to borrow and update the suffragettes' cry, plinths for women are wanted everywhere.
Thank you, Terri. That was fascinating and totally inspirational. Thank you so much for your time. In 2018, when we first heard about Elizabeth and decided that we'd do some fundraising, it was for a small plaque or a notice board or something like that to go in the town centre that would just tell people that Elizabeth lived here. But the more we learned about Elizabeth, the more we began to understand how radical she was, how important she was, the work she did and the difference it has made to the lives of women from that time. We thought perhaps we'd get a small statue. And then in May of 2018, the first woman statue was erected in Parliament Square. It was Millicent Fawcett, who was a contemporary of Elizabeth. And around the plinth of the statue is featured photographs of the most influential women of the suffragist movement. And right under her right foot is our Elizabeth. When we learned this, we were so excited, and we realised even more how important she was and that it was being recognised that she was. And we thought, if she's being recognised and commemorated in London, she surely needs to be commemorated properly here in Congleton, the town that she lived for 54 years. And then we heard about the Our Emmeline campaign in Manchester and the beautiful statue that was being made there. And I contacted a wonderful woman called Hazel Reeves. And Hazel is the sculptor that made that beautiful piece of work. And we are very lucky that we have got Hazel here with us today. I'm going to go over to her now. Hello, Hazel.
Hi, it's Susan. It's lovely to see your smiley face again.
I wonder, could you tell us a little bit about the process of making a statue and maybe a little bit about the Our Emmeline project?
Yeah, I suppose the process of making a statue, for me, it's all about storytelling and how you can tell a story in bronze. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's identifying what I want to communicate and then trying different ways that I might do that with a figure, person, something like Emmeline Pankhurst. And that's where it grows from, trying to tell that story and thinking about what impact I want to have. So I know that for me, there's no point in having a statue that's just going to sit there. If I think back, I never noticed statues until I became a sculptor because they didn't speak to me. I never saw myself reflected back. So it's really important that you think about who you can reach. And I think sculpture should be a catalyst. And it's about moving people. It's about moving them to tears or to action or to radical change. It's about it being a catalyst. And so once I work out the story I want to tell, and I tend to work with a little maquette in a material, could be something soft, a bit like plasticine, and I try out different moves, and I work with a model. So I'm very much about the relationship I have with the model and how we together can sort of choreograph the piece so that it works from every single angle. So something like Emmeline Pankhurst, you're going to see her 360 degrees in the round. And so every point, if you're standing around that circle, you have to have something interesting to see. So that becomes a small little model, and usually there's a client and they can give their feedback on that sort of model. And then you take it into the process of actually going from something this size to something this size. And my studio's here, you can't see it, but it's incredibly high ceiling because, you know, I often do really large pieces, and you have to scale up from the small maquette up to the full size piece. And it was a joy when the women councillors of Manchester came to my studio, along with some of the women that run the Safe Spots domestic abuse charity, and they came here to see her in process. And it was a real joy for me, because I tend to be in the studio on my own or maybe with a model, but to actually have people that are really invested in the project from the start and continue to be invested right up until the unveiling, which, as you know, there are up to 6,000 people there, and 1,000 kids chanting. And so you know that actually having a process that's very much about engaging with the public from the start right to the end is going to be really important. And I'm so pleased you got, you'll have Andrew Simcock talking about the process, because, actually asking Mancunians, well, which woman of Manchester do you want to commemorate in bronze? And so people had a real vested interest from the start. And of course, overwhelmingly, it was Emmeline that they wanted. But that's not to say there aren't these incredible Mancunian women. So now they have their book, which actually tells you the story of not just Emmeline, but all the other women that didn't make it to the bronze yet.
Yet indeed. Keep watching this space, because we are working towards getting our statue unveiled on International Women's Day 2022. International Women's Day is March the 8th, and 2022 is a very important year for Congleton. It's our 750th anniversary of the Charter. So there's going to be lots of stuff going on all the way through the year, and we're hoping that our statue unveiling on March the 8th will be kicking everything off for all the other things that's going ahead. We are planning for that day. We're already planning our unveiling. We've got the wonderful Baroness Hale has agreed to come and cut our ribbons, so that's really, really good. Can I just ask you before you go, why do you think it's important that we get a bronze statue?
Well, you need something which is permanent, not sort of ephemeral. And bronze is a precious metal, it's durable, it's robust. So in some ways it's quite practical, but actually, because of the value of the metal, if you have someone commemorated in bronze, it elevates them in some way in terms of status. And as we know, so few women have been celebrated in bronze. And it really is an injustice, not to have had a statue of Emmeline Pankhurst in the city of her birth, not to have a statue of Elizabeth in her, the town that she uses her own. So it's really important that we actually celebrate these lives, but also these statues acting as a catalyst. So it's also saying to people that women have done incredible things. You as a woman, you as a girl can do incredible things. And that is about having a role model, and literally having a role model on the streets for young girls. I think it's so important in terms of developing their ambitions, developing their belief. So it is a matter of justice. It's about challenging gender stereotypes. So having these role models so girls can actually see, yeah, I can be like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Elizabeth was tiny.
Mm-hmm.
She did incredible things, you know, 50 years working for women's suffrage. You think about all the causes that she championed and the legislation she brought in is incredible. Why haven't we heard her story so far? So it's about redressing that balance and having something that we can go to, a statue where our Congleton can go to and celebrate her life, but celebrate all women's life and appreciate contributions to society. So I think statues, of course, are only one entry point in bringing about change and bringing about equality. But I think it's quite a symbolic one for us all.
Thank you, Hazel. Thank you for your time. We do appreciate it. And can we just say that Elizabeth Group thinks that our Emmeline is an absolutely beautiful statue. Your work is amazing. Thank you. Somebody who has been very interested in our campaign and who has supported us a lot is Councillor Andrew Simcock of Manchester City Council. And Andrew was heavily involved with our Emmeline campaign, and he's got something he wants to talk to us about. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Susan. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I hope you are too.
Yep, good. So, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to come on and talk about, first of all, our Emmeline project, but then I was hoping that I might be able to take things to the next level. And you can see it, I've got with me my maquette of the Emmeline Pankhurst statue. That, of course, was a very important element of the fundraising for the campaign in the first place, because we sold 12 of these and made a pretty good sum of money for the campaign as we were getting going. And I think fundraising clearly in the new environment is going to be one of the key challenges that all statue campaigns of all types will be struggling with. So I thought, rather than just talk about our Emmeline Pankhurst campaign, that statue will have now been in place for 18 months, and in fact, I've just gone through the first phase of having it cleaned. We had Lucy Branch from Antique Bronze came up and cleaned the statue to great excitement. A lot of people were very interested in what she was doing, and we've had the meeting circle cleaned as well. So I think one of the messages I've taken away from that is the importance of not just raising money for the statue, but what happens next? Who owns the statue? Who cleans it? Who maintains it? And at the moment, I'm still working on the transfer agreement for going across to the City Council, because I want to make sure, long after I've gone, that statue is still being cared for. So in the last few months, following the Emmeline Pankhurst campaign, I've been down in London quite a bit. I've been meeting people from the Government Equality Office, I've been meeting members of Parliament, and I've been meeting people who used to be Secretaries of State and chairs of committees in Parliament to talk about how we go about recognising more women with statues in the coming years. And I've got to be realistic, today is May the 19th. We're a long way from the coronavirus pandemic response being complete, and it would make no sense not to realise that statues of women must take a backseat to fighting the virus. That said, at least we can be planning campaigns and discussing the topic. And here you can see that very early on in the pandemic, somebody came along and equipped Emmeline with her own mask. My suggestion that I've been working on is that in order to celebrate the centenary of equal suffrage 8 years from now, that we have a project to create 50 new statues of women around the UK over the period from now to 2028. That would effectively double the number of statues of named individual women in the UK. The funding for that would come from philanthropists, individuals, companies, plus an element of matched funding from the government. And it could take the form of a competition amongst members of parliament, their local communities and councils. They perhaps would nominate the women to be recognised. I think it's worth bearing in mind in this context that the Government Equality Office ran their very successful fund in 2018 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the original 1918 Act. And that's how the statue of Emmeline Pankhurst came to be funded, partly by them, but also partly by organisations like Manchester Airport, which of course now is very badly hit by the COVID crisis. There are already some campaigns underway for statues of women, and there you can see, second from the bottom, Elizabeth Wolstenholme, but there are other campaigns around the country, Ellen Wilkinson in Middlesbrough, and what I've done there is list who the MP is for the area. Andy MacDonald is the Middlesbrough MP. I would expect him to be championing, hopefully, Ellen Wilkinson for funding. And then you've got various other members of parliament around the country. And then I've been doing some research on statues that we could potentially have based on my research. There will definitely be others. And I'll be very interested to hear what organisations like Invisible Women think of this list. It's driven partly by the fact that I'm trying to spread this around the country. So you'll see, for example, the very first name on the list there, Molly Badham, who is a zoologist. Her member of parliament is Nigel Huddleston, who is the Minister for Tourism with a constituency in mid-Worcestershire. You've also got other people like Octavia Hill, North East Cambridgeshire, Wisbech, Stephen Barclay, and I've tried to build in some of the names from the north of England, those so-called red wall constituencies that became conservative. And so, for example, you've got Jean Hayward from Blythe, who you may remember from her performances in When the Boat Comes In. And there are other people on the list as well. So there's my starter for 10. There will definitely be other names around the country, and that maybe is one of the consequences of this campaign that we can kick off. It's hard to see when normality will be returning, certainly in the next few months, but I think if in 2021 we made a date to all meet up, I think that would be a very good outcome from this campaign.
Well, I am thrilled by that news. That's really exciting. We are definitely going to have this statue, no doubt about it. Just before finishing the film, I'd like us to think a little bit about what the statue is going to mean for our town, for Congleton. And I've got with me, to finish up the film, one of our town councillors. It's Councillor Kay Wesley, who's a trustee of Elizabeth's group. Over to you, Kay.
Well, of course, Congleton is a historic market town. It's been around since 1272. It has a really rich history, and people do come to Congleton for the history. We have a great little museum, we have some historic buildings, and we also have a couple of statues. We have one of a war hero, a man, and one of a dog. And I think it's really important that we celebrate all the people who've achieved in Congleton. And of course, Elizabeth was one of the most important people in Congleton's history. So there are many parts of the town that she touched, many parts of the town where she spoke. She had an influence. She started a school here. And I think it's really important that we have this piece of art, which people will come along and look at for its own sake, but then we'll start asking questions. Who was this woman? What did she do? Why is she here in Congleton? What did she contribute here specifically? And we know, of course, Elizabeth is a national figure. She had a huge impact on so many parts of women's lives. In all sorts of different areas, both in politics, but also in healthcare, also in the home, family rights and married women's rights and property rights and so on. So she had a massive influence on the way we live our lives today. And if people see this wonderful statue and start asking those questions, then they can learn more about the contribution that she made and also about the history of women and women's rights. Of course, the important thing is the fight isn't over. We still have inequalities today. So in Elizabeth, having a statue of Elizabeth here in Congleton will inspire people to challenge inequalities that we still see today. Congleton is trying to become a white ribbon town, which means we're trying to stamp out violence against women, which is another thing that Elizabeth campaigned for. And we have a number of other areas where we're trying to drive more gender equality and improve opportunities for women and girls. And the presence of Elizabeth will remind us that this fight isn't over and we need to keep striving for equality.
Fantastic, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Kay, and thank you for everything you do for the town, and good luck with the White Ribbon campaign. We really need it. Well, I think you can see now how important female statues are and how we need to break that bronze ceiling. Congleton could be part of this heritage trail of statues that are going up across the UK. Elizabeth was very famous in her day, and she put Congleton on the map in the late 19th and early 20th century. She can do the same again for Congleton in this day and age. 2022, International Women's Day, is when our statue will be unveiled. Thank you very much. Thanks to everybody who helped to make this film, and thank you to all our donors and supporters. Thank you. So remember, stay well, keep thinking about Elizabeth, keep thinking about our wonderful bronze statue and International Women's Day 2022. And we'll be back out there where you can see us after the lockdown is over. Thank you.